Lions shift on that defensive front. Long count by Rodgers. Will he snap it? There he goes. They go on the end around to Lazard. Yes. They didn't get it. Yes. Blown up by Alex Anzalone. They tried to come in the end around with a jet sweep look that time to Lazard. Anzalone said, not on my watch. Two deep safeties here. It is 3rd and 5 Green Bay from the Lion 24. There's the shotgun snap to Rodgers. He's back, pumps, hit, going down. Sack back at the 30-yard line. Aiden Hutchinson got him again. So here we go. The Lions can end this ball game right here. 4th and 1 from the Green Bay 15. These Packers fighting to get into the playoffs. The Lions fighting to get this ball game right here. They're going to go empty. Goff takes the snap, back, looks, throws, caught. First down, Detroit Lions. DJ Chark down inside the 10-yard line. This game is over. Yes. It is over. Execute a couple of snaps, and these Lions are going home with a victory.
Well, there's the voice. It's episode 250, and we wanted a special guest, and we got him. Detroit's Fox 2 sports director and anchor and outstanding Detroit Lions radio network play-by-play guy, Dan Miller. First of all, Dan, thanks for the time. And I want to just start it off with a question, kind of a little, not really rambling, but, we watched this Lions team, Hard Knocks. We're all fired up. They get off to a 1-6 start. We're thinking, what's going on? And then they finish 8-2 and have the big W at Lambeau to end the season with a winning record. I mean, walk us a little bit through your emotions this season, because I know you get into your broadcast and it had to be a roller coaster.
Yeah, it was. Number one, thank you for having me, and congratulations on 250. That's a great run and still going. Look, I think, I've told people this before. When Hard Knocks happened and people all around the country were jumping on the Lions bandwagon and saying, oh my gosh, this team's going to do X, Y, and Z. I feel like there was a group of us in the media in Detroit that were kind of saying to people, hey, pump the brakes a little bit. This team won 3 games last year. Now, I didn't see 1-6 coming. I certainly thought that start would be better than that. It was a weird 1-6 because they had winnable games outside of the New England game that kind of got away from them. And it was literally one play to a half of a play that could have swung some of those games. So 1-6, it was tough, man. 1-6 is 1-6, regardless of how you want to parse it and say they could have won some of those games. You're 1-6. So it was pretty brutal. And then they just started cleaning some things up. It wasn't this massive schematic shift or lineup shift or anything like that. They stopped turning the ball over. They started taking the ball away. They were winning the turnover battle on a regular basis. They stopped for the most part. There was some times where they didn't, committing the penalties that were giving other teams extended drives, first downs, things like that. And really, those are the things that helped turn them around. It was ball security and just playing smarter. And all of a sudden, you looked up, and that margin that they weren't able to handle in the first 7 games, they started to have that going their way, and they started to win. And then they gained confidence, got on a run, and it was a really nice way to end the season. Disappointing way to start, because that's ultimately what cost them, was that 1-6 start.
Yeah, especially seeing a couple of the teams that have played in and moved on in the playoffs, the Lions beat.
You know what? Credit to them. They got there. And I know what you're saying, and it does make you just kind of go, you felt like they could have done some damage if they could have gotten in there. Yeah. The way they were playing at the end, if they'd have gotten into the playoffs, you get the feeling they could have hung around for a while. They could have played with these teams. I don't think there's one team in the NFC that I look at right now that I would have said going in there, oh, they're in big trouble. That doesn't mean they were going to win. Yeah. But it just meant you felt like they could go in there and represent themselves and have a chance to win. But again, that's just us sitting here talking now. You got to handle your business. And ultimately, that's, I think, Dan Campbell's message to this team is, don't put yourself in a position where you need help from somebody else. Don't put yourself in a position where you've got to dig out of a massive hole, because both those things were true about this team this year.
Yeah. Dan, you brought up Dan Campbell, and we're recording on Monday night, and Coach Campbell is going to be with the Mannings on Monday Night Football. So I'll be curious to see that interview with Coach Campbell. But I wanted to ask you about him. We've all seen the previous regimes, and it's not taking any knocks at these previous coaches, Morningweg, Schwartz, Marinelli, Patricia, some of these other guys. Are you all in on, because, so it's been a little back and forth. There's been some growing pains with Dan Campbell, obviously turned it around at the end of last season, turned it around at the end of this season, coupled with how Brad Holmes drafts. They have a bunch of great draft picks next year. Are you all in on Dan Campbell? And is it basically win the NFC North or bust next year? Or is it still kind of a little growing to do?
Yeah, I think it's the organization. I don't think it's just Dan Campbell. I think you're looking at this as a package. I think it's Brad Holmes. I think it's Dan Campbell. I think it's his staff. I think it's everything that's there. Look, I think starting with Campbell, he checks a lot of boxes. He's consistent. He knows who he is. The players love him. He hasn't changed one bit since the day he got there. Some coaches, when things aren't going well, you see him kind of say, "Oh, I'm going to try this," or "I'm going to be more stern," or "I'm going to try this way of acting towards." He doesn't change regardless of what's going on. Never gets, flustered at the podium, never takes shots at anybody, never has a problem with a question, and deals with his players with the same respect that he deals with everybody else. And I think that they see that. They can smell a phony. They can smell somebody they don't want to play with. And this guy is somebody that doesn't, move the needle in that regard in any kind of negative way. I think the most important thing you can say about Dan Campbell, outside of the fact that players want to play for him and do play for him, is that he has assembled a staff that has developed players, because that's been missing around here for a long time. If you don't develop the players that you draft and get a pipeline going, you will never be a successful franchise. You just can't do it. It's what the two teams I hold up, Pittsburgh and Baltimore, continuous success over an extended period of time, because they know the players they want, they draft them, they develop them, and they continuously replace guys that leave, retire, free agency, deal because of salaries, things like that. And I think you can look up and down this roster and see players that the Lions have brought in. This 8-2 was fueled in many ways by guys that were in their first and second years, guys that are playing good football for this team. And that's what gives me hope. That's what makes me believe. Yeah, I believe in the guys. I think Brad Holmes has earned that. I think Dan Campbell has earned that. But it's the results that allows you to say, here's tangibly why I believe these guys are doing it the right way. And I think that's what I think separates this group from groups that we've seen in the past, is that they're doing what you have to do. They've been conservative. They haven't gone out and spent huge money on free agents. They haven't felt the need to swing massive trades or anything like that. They have built through the draft and young players, which is where you have to be. Now, I think into this offseason, they can be much more pointed in terms of their direction and what they want to do, because they know their roster, they know their holes. To your point, yes, I believe the bottom line is you do have to compete in that NFC North next year. Do you win it? We'll see. Let's see where we are in December. But I think as a baseline, for the first time in a long time, you're looking at it and saying nothing less would be acceptable with this team. Not understanding injuries or anything like that. But as we stand right now, going into an offseason and coming off of this season, and understanding there will be significant changes to this roster, even as well as they've finished, I just think that's where they are as a franchise right now. It's time to put expectations on them.
One of the big parts of this past season has been, Ben Johnson, the offensive coordinator. We love watching him every Sunday. He dials up plays, one of the best in the league, obviously leading candidate for a lot of head coaching jobs. I feel like we as Lions fans still don't really know much about him, though. I know you've been able to kind of have a front row seat to a lot of his games that he's called the last 2 years. What is there that you can tell us about this guy, and how important was he to this team this past year?
Very important. I think you'd call it a meteoric rise, even though he's been in this league for a while. From somebody who wasn't calling plays to 1 year of calling plays to getting interviews for head coaching jobs is really a testament to the job that he did. And look, they had a lot of weapons. This offensive line is what this team was built around, and they've put a lot of assets into getting this offense going in the right direction, but he got it going in the right direction, and he made it all work. So look, nothing but respect for Ben Johnson. My gut is he's probably going to get one of these jobs and won't be back. We'll see what happens. Things can fall in a strange way, and dominoes can kind of go against you. So I can't guarantee he won't be back, but it certainly feels like he's going to get one of these gigs. And you know what? That's price of being successful. That's the price that you pay. And that means people are taking note of what you're doing, and you're doing something right. And look, Dan Campbell, it's then incumbent upon him to go out and find somebody, whether it's on the staff now or he goes outside the organization. But I think, in 2 years, looking at this staff that I mentioned a moment ago, the job they've done, I think you give them the benefit of the doubt. Doesn't mean it's optimal or what you want to do, but there's nothing you can do about it. And I guarantee you Dan Campbell's getting a short list of guys together right now. And I guarantee you he's got one.
Right.
A short list of guys together right now that he is going to look to replace him, like I said, whether it's in-house or outside the organization.
Well, when you talk about offense, and obviously the face of the team is your quarterback, some of your thoughts on Jared Goff and what he did this year and maybe what the future holds.
I think Jared Goff had to answer the question this year whether or not he was this team's quarterback. I don't think you could get to the end of this season with any question about whether or not he was the guy. And I think 6-7 games in, with the problems that he had, protecting the football, there were still questions about that. They were scoring, number one scoring team in the league for a month, and ended up top 5 in scoring. I think he answered those questions with the way that he played over the final 10, 11 games of the season, the way he protected the football, the way he scored points, the way he moved this offense, the way guys rally behind him and want to play with him and for him, which is important for a quarterback. Look, he's this team's quarterback. And I think they'll bring in, my guess is a quarterback somewhere along the line as a developmental guy, but I don't think it'll be a first-round quarterback. We'll see. I don't think it'll be a first-round quarterback unless it's somebody they absolutely love that's sitting there on the board and you can't pass him up. Jared Goff is this team's quarterback.
Yep.
I do think you need to start developing something behind them. I think it's been blind spot maybe for this organization that they haven't had somebody back there that was ready in case Goff went down. I don't necessarily think there's anybody we've seen in the past several years that you would look at and say, okay, if the starting quarterback gets hurt, you're still going to be able to win games. Now, maybe that's more teams than not in this league. It's a long way of saying Goff's the quarterback. He will be the quarterback next year. But I would be surprised if there's not a youngish quarterback added to this roster behind him.
I mean, that was kind of the problem. We don't want to necessarily call it a problem, but through all the Stafford years, they never seemed to address the backup quarterback significantly anyway, through all the Stafford years, maybe like signing Chase Daniel, but they never drafted like a developmental guy to be maybe if Stafford went down. So maybe that's something they need to address, especially looking at the playoffs right now and all the teams still playing in the playoffs with backup quarterbacks, or they made the playoffs with backup quarterbacks. The 49ers have a third string Mr. Irrelevant. They might win the NFC, So
I think they've drafted a couple, but I think they will put more emphasis on it, if you will. It will be more of a sense of urgency and this it's just a guess. I just think at some point, and it's not to say he's going to replace Jared Goff, but you've got to have somebody that's getting ready to be that guy. And I think at some point with all these draft picks they have, and maybe it's a free agent from another team that they like as a young developmental guy. I truly believe next year there will be somebody in there somewhere behind Jared that they're bringing along that'll give them some sense of stability in the future if something were to happen to Jared. But none of this is to say that he's not the guy. He is the guy. And I think he defined himself as that this season.
Yeah. One thing I found interesting when I was looking up your kind of backstory is that you grew up in the DC area and your dad was a season ticket holder for the Washington Commanders for a long time. How did you end up making your way to Detroit? And when you got here, were you a little bit depressed to have to become, somewhat of a pseudo Lions fan?
No, you know what? In my business, you kind of go where the job is. And my wife and I had, looked at, I was working in DC, I was doing talk radio and I was doing television in DC and wanted to get into television full time. And we had looked at a couple of jobs in a couple different places and had an opportunity in a couple different places, didn't get the opportunity we wanted in a couple places. And we just kind of, I've told people it felt like we ran an obstacle course to get where we were by, not getting jobs, getting offered jobs, not taking jobs, things like that. And then one day my agent called me and said, there's a news director in Detroit that likes your tape. And we hadn't applied. He had gone to, they used to have these warehouses where people would go and they'd say, I need a weather guy or I need a sports guy or something like that. And literally they could sit there and watch tape after tape after tape after tape. And mine popped out to him. And I got that call from my agent, and I've said this before. I walked downstairs to my wife, and I remember she was in the kitchen, and I said, "There's a news director in Detroit that likes our tape." And she goes, "Okay." And I said to her, "You know this is it, right?" And she said, "I know." And it was just something that told me at that moment that this was going to be the one. And we'd had, such a weird kind of road to get there. And for some reason, something just told me that this was going to be it. And, as far as the Lions thing, I think it was organic. I think you come here. I did shows for the Lions starting, I think, my second year here. I was hosting their weekly show. And it just, I think you become, and I was doing our pregame show and our postgame show back in the day with the guys, doing it weekly. And I think you just become immersed in it. You get to know people, you get to know coaches, you get to know players. And after a while, you're rooting for them. You know them, you want them to succeed. You see the fans. And this is before I became the play-by-play guy or anything like that. Right. You want to see them succeed. You're feeling the vibe of the city. You work here. So I think it was kind of organic that it just became this, that you started rooting for the team to do well. And like I said, that was before I even got the play-by-play job. So it's hard to be in a city long-term and so deep into covering a team on a daily basis, whether it's the Pistons or Wings or something like that, and not find yourself rooting for them and rooting for the story.
I know I've relocated. I moved out to Connecticut where I started my career at ESPN, and I didn't jump on any of the Boston or New York or Washington bandwagons. I'm now down in North Carolina. I am not going to be a Panthers fan. I can tell you that. My daughter, actually, funny story. She came home. She's in first grade. She said, "Daddy, why am I always wearing Lions stuff? All my friends at school are wearing Panthers shirts." And I was like, you won't see any Panthers shirts in this household. But anyway, I was going to ask you about moving to Detroit and in the local news game and how it's just changed. You've been doing it for a long time. I started at Fox 17 in Grand Rapids. Jared did also at Fox 17 in Grand Rapids. I knew some people that actually relocated to Detroit at WXYZ down there. So I've stayed engaged, I guess, paying attention to local news. I enjoyed my time doing local news. Things have changed a lot, though, as you would definitely know. One of my favorite things after Lions games is, just being honest, is when they post the videos, whether on YouTube or Twitter, of your calls matched up to the plays. You're very good at what you do. And obviously I'm a diehard Lions fan, so I love it. That kind of thing, social media, just how local news has changed, sports, all that kind of stuff. What have you seen that's been like the most significant change over either covering sports or just in general in local news, sports, all that kind of stuff in your career?
Yeah, I mean, thank you for the kind words. I think it's just that it has gone from something you did at 5, 6, 10, and 11 to it's all day. I mean, it's immediate because we now have Twitter and Facebook, Instagram, all these different things. It's just, there's a constant flow. It's never not on. It's not like you wait to break something until, or comment on something or put something out on something until 6 or 5 or wait till 10. And I will tell you that's somewhat new even in the last 15, 18 years, because, I remember when Mariucci got fired and I had that story and Mike O'Hara from the Detroit News had that story, and I knew he had it. And even then the Detroit News wasn't putting out Mike's story until I think 10 or 11 o'clock at night, because that's when they put out the early morning edition for the next day. So it wasn't even immediate back then. So I'm kind of trying to get my nuts and bolts of this story together for our 10 o'clock news. And I know I have some time to work it. I know he's working it. I'm working it. But it was, I remember that. And I bring that up just because it shows you, if that happened now, you would have to put that out much, much quicker. You wouldn't have, 6 or 7 hours after the game gathering information and the ability to do that. Now you still got to be right. But it's just the way things have evolved since then. That's the biggest change, I think, is, look, there's so many more channels than they were when I got into this business. There's so many more places where people can get their news. But when all is said and done, it's the immediacy of it. and just the delivery has changed so much, and the expectation of the viewer, listener, reader has changed so much.
I got two quick ones for you, Dan. We don't want to keep you all night, but my last couple of questions, it's kind of a follow-up to Jared's. You grew up a Redskins fan. He called it, the Commanders, but they're the Redskins back in your day. I had a team, or two teams, the Tigers of 68 and 84. It's tough for me to decide. What about you? Is it the George Allen Skins or the Joe Gibbs?
Oh, I mean, all of them have a place in my heart. I mean, I grew up a massive Bullets fan too, and them winning the championship in '78 was huge for me in my childhood. And I was at Game 6 against Seattle at the Capitol Center when they blew them out to get to Game 7 in Seattle, which was enduring memory. Look, George Allen brought winning football to Washington, and that's when I was introduced to the game. So certainly that's Sonny Jurgensen, Billy Kilmer, Larry Brown, Charlie Taylor, Chris Hanberger, all those guys, Ken Houston, Pat Fisher. Those are all guys that helped introduce me to the game. I mean, the Joe Gibbs teams, though, that introduced me to what championships were in football, and going to a parade and seeing that team win and all the things that they did. And Frank Herzog, the voice of the team, is the guy that rings in my ear when I see Riggins go around the left side, and I can hear his call still, even though I watch the game on television. And a lot of my touchdown call is from Frank. I mean, he's the guy that was a mentor to me and was somebody that I looked at and just wanted to be like him. He did TV, he did play-by-play. I wanted to do what he did, and I've been blessed enough to be able to do that. So, I mean, there's something that I take from all of those experiences and all of those teams growing up that shape who I am today. But I think when you see a team that you root for win 3 Super Bowls, and you see a team that you root for go to 4 Super Bowls, it's a pretty amazing run. And then to be able to cover that team when I got into the business was pretty special as well. So. It was an amazing time, and you went into every season thinking you had a chance to win a Super Bowl. That's the kind of run that they had there.
The follow-up question I have as a play-by-play guy, and you're obviously one of the best throughout the entire NFL. There's no question about it. But I have noticed on some of the Twitter feeds, first of all, you're very animated, which I can appreciate. You're into the game, but your helpers there, your spotters, handing you notes, you make it sound seamless. They must do a great job getting you that information that you can pass on.
They're unbelievable. I mean, Joe Abramson, my spotter, has been with me since I was doing games for Fox. So he's been with me for 23 years. Mike Bratta, my statistician, came along when I started doing the Lions. So he's been with me for 18. Our engineer, Al Rosenberg, is the best in the country. I mean, every major event, Al is the engineer for that. So I'm surrounded by amazing people, and I come to lean on them so hard. I mean, I call them my right and left arms, and then Al's just behind me making sure everything goes on the air. But they're the best at what they do. You see Joe every night sitting next to George Blaha. He's been with George for over 30 years. So, I mean, these are the best of the best, and I'm lucky enough to have them in the booth with me. And if there's one thing that I really am happy about with those videos, it is that people have gotten to see the amount of support that I get from people in that booth, that it's not just me. And that it is an operation. It is right arm, left arm, and it's a group effort. And that's been really cool that they've gotten some recognition. I mean, Mike has now become known as Sticky Note Guy, and, it's taken on a life of its own, which I think is really cool. And, so those videos have been, it's fun when you win. People enjoy stuff when you win. And that's certainly part of that. And I understand that. But the coolest thing for me has been that people can see what I know is that a big part of everything I do is the people around me.
This is a tough question, but I got to put you on the hot seat a little bit. What's your favorite call from over the years? I know my favorite one was your Golden Tate walk-off touchdown versus Minnesota. That's mine. What was yours if you had to pick one?
Yeah, it's that one. It's definitely the Golden Tate one. That's the one that I hear about from people more often than not. If people bring up a call, it is that one. And I've, that one also is special to me because my son was at Michigan State at the time, and he was in his frat house, and he had been out doing something, and he came back home, and he back to the house, and they're like, "Oh my God, did you hear your dad? Did you hear your dad?" And Tony's like, I have no idea what you're talking about. And so they were all talking about it and talking about that call. And he called me up, and he was proud to have me as his dad, which is, kind of unusual because usually it was just dad doing his job. And,
Right.
I've been doing that job since they were this tall. So that will always be special to me because it meant something to him to walk back into that house and have guys say something about that to him. So that one will always stick out in my mind, because it was so sudden and so unbelievable and incredible to win at Minnesota and to win in that fashion, and that something semi-legible came out of my mouth and people remember it. So yeah, I think that one, I mean, the interception, pick six against San Diego to lock up the playoffs in 2011 and get them back in that kind of relevant position was big as well. But that I think just because so many people bring it up and because of what that one meant to me, it's the Golden Tate call.
Yeah, it was a great call. Well, Dan, I know you got things to do. You got work to do. We just got to have fun here. But I assume you're on the Harbaugh story tonight. Is that one of the things you're working on?
I mean, I guess the story's over. So, I mean, it looks like he's going to be back in Michigan. He'll get a new deal here. I think the thing to watch when he gets a new deal is, what's that buyout look like?
Yeah.
Because, the school's probably going to want to protect themselves a little bit from, having to go through this on a yearly basis. But yeah, I mean, it's look, he's due a raise. He gave some money back when things weren't going well. Things have gone great. He'll get his money. He'll be back at Michigan, and I think we can all just kind of move forward now. I think it's the 2 years that he's put together there, beating Ohio State, getting to the playoffs, been terrific, and we'll see where it goes from here. But I think we're all kind of glad that you can kind of just set this one aside now and say he's coming back, and let's get about the business of seeing what the offseason looks like. It's already been good in terms of the transfer portal, and see how these two teams shape up going into the next year.
Yep.
Dan Miller, we appreciate the time so much. I know you have the news tonight, the sports, but tell our listeners best spot to follow you on socials.
I am on Twitter at Dan Miller Fox 2. That's about it. I willfully stayed away from Instagram. I think I have an account that I never did anything with, and Facebook or anything like that. So you can find me on Twitter. And our, Fox 2 Sports is on Twitter as well. So
Great.
That's where you find what we're doing here. And we appreciate the follows and people that check out what we do.
Appreciate it, Dan. Thanks for the time, man. We really enjoyed it.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate it. Nice chatting with you.
Thanks.
Thank you.